What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I am back with yet another collection update. Been really trying to get through all the stuff that I've had, kind of stacked up for a while, so get ready for another at least two. Already working on the next one, but this one is going to feature all the stuff that I got in Maryland when I was there for MDF, which, yeah, it's taken me till July to actually get through all that stuff. Now, of course, there's other stuff in here as well. I did some distro diving once again, some really cool new releases, as well as some fun reissues and such. Actually, there's a good chunk of this that will be reissues. But yeah, this one's kind of sizable, so let's just get right down to it. We're going to kick it off with Coffin Feeder, Big Trouble. This is the first full length from this Belgian brutal death metal act, maybe deathcore. I got into this band with their EP Serial Homicide, which I thought was pretty decent, and the main reason I got it is because this band is fronted by Svenko from Aborted and Fetal Blood Eagle as well. If you haven't checked out that band, I recommend them as well. And before I take the slipcover off this, because it says it is censored in over 286 countries, which I think is probably bullshit, but if it is, I want to say the censoring is kind of odd because, again, we just have little snippets of stuff that's going on here. And, yeah, this band has a thing for just 80s action, everything. I have the actual cover up next me. And, yeah, we have Arnold Schwarzenegger. We have Jesse Ventura from Running Man. I believe Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China is floating in the background. Lots and lots of references. But, yeah, they censored this. But on the back, they have the band done up as 80s action heroes, which I find interesting that they didn't bother censoring that, because if you look at whoever is portraying Conan there, this sword is rather pink and fleshy, and there's something about the hilt that just screams, I definitely want to stab something, but it's already an open wound and will probably require lube. If that sword was shorter, it'd be called a dill dagger, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, the choice not to censor that at all, but, the cover, whatever, which I think, again, it's kind of bullshit, but the cover is a glorious piece of art. I'm a child of the 80s, and all these references warm my heart, especially Sharon Stone from Total Recall kicking the face right off of what I assume is chubby, worthless Steven Seagal. Anyway, though, let's talk about the music. The music, it's hard not to compare to Aborted. It's pretty much Aborted with a little bit more of a deathcore sort of flair. It's got, more breakdowns. There's more, groove to it. It definitely has its blasty sections, but this definitely has a more like modern deathcore sort of sound, I guess you could say. You got some fun guests on here. Mark Hunter from Chimera, Julian Truchin, I'm sorry if I'm screwing up your name, from Benighted, and Ben Doer, I'm screwing up your name too, from Shadow of Intent. Pretty sure all three of those guys probably made appearances on Aborted albums too. But the music is brutal, it's chuggy, it's riffy. There's a cinematic score sort of quality to all of the interludes that build up. Lots of samples and such. The songs overall are pretty short, kind of straight to the point. The song titles are a lot of fun. And if you get the references, then we've definitely watched a lot of the same movies, like Pork Chop Express, If It Bleeds, Get to the Party, Let Off Some Steam. Yeah, all this I think was just done with a wry sense of humor and, kind of just worship and tribute of, honestly, a great era of just awesome movies. Whether they're gloriously dumb, over-the-top action movies like fucking Commando, which I love that movie, but it's so fucking over the top. Or Big Trouble in Little China, which is peak 80s fucking everything. I don't think many movies 80s as hard as that movie. But yeah, musically, it's a little bit more of a novelty. It's alright. I would honestly prefer Fetal Blood Eagle over this band, but, this is pretty solid. If you're a big fan of, Aborted, naturally, and by extension, Fetal Blood Eagle, but also, bits of Whitechapel, Shadow of Intent is, a little comparable at points, not as symphonic, obviously. Maybe Through the Eyes of the Dead as well. I don't know. Check this out. Pretty fun listen. Atus Tempus, Atus, Rerum. I don't know what any of those words mean. Anyway, this is the second album from this Argentinian death metal / blackened death metal act. I picked this up, I believe, in Rotted Life's distro. I jammed a couple of tracks and went, holy shit, that sounds like Morbid Angel, and man, is it dark and creepy. That's sometimes generally enough for me to actually pick up an album, and this thing absolutely smokes. This is just disgusting, atmospheric, dark, sinister death metal. I would say it leans a little bit more towards death metal. Like, you do have some like colder tremolos that show up, but a lot of the tremolos on here, and there's a fuck ton, are deep, they're menacing. The production here is almost like perfectly murky. The guitar sound just like a touch dirty. It really comes out in the harmonized tremolo riffs. The vocals are like a tad muffled, but it kind of just works with that more, I wouldn't necessarily call it like full-on cavernous, but again, it's slightly murky. It sounds very 90s, I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. You have lots of like twisting, dissonant, atonal riffs and sections, good slow death doom breakdowns, and man, all the songs are in Spanish, and I suck at that too. But, I mean, there really wasn't a song in here I didn't like. I mean, outside of the intro track, which, yeah, most of the time that's pretty damn skippable. But a lot of this, I mean, in terms of, like, South American death metal, it really kind of reminded me a lot of Fossilization. There's a lot of, like, hypnotic droning sections where they'll just stretch out like a whole groove and tremolo section and just kind of like lay on the atmosphere with these cavernous, ghoulish vocals in the background. It has surprisingly technical moments. The drum work in here is fantastic. Lots of cool turnovers, really good transitions. The songs are longer too overall, but at no point did I feel like any of them dragged. In fact, like the dynamics I think were just on point in terms of like, you know, keeping the songs interesting, keeping them evil, and keeping them just riffy as fuck. The last two tracks in particular I will say are standouts, even though I can't say them. We'll just say track 6, I really appreciated the touches of melody in there. Like there's like some subtle nods to melodeath kind of worked in, but it doesn't overtake the song and become too melodic. And the last track, man, Maleficicios Conjuros Lamentation, yeah, I tried. It's almost proggy in terms of its song structure. Like the dynamics and like the transitions feel a little bit more technical, a little bit more lavish overall. Lots of like layered guitars on there. It creates this sort of like, I don't know, dense miasma of fucking riffs. I don't know. Everything about this album is dark and sinister and awesome. I dig every track. I jammed this for John, and he absolutely fell in love with it, which I pretty much just said, yeah, this is a John band. You'll love it. There's a lot of dissonance. There's a lot of low-end tremolo, and it sounds creepy and evil. And yeah, if you're into anything like that, you know, Incantation, Fossilization, Dead Congregation as well. Lots of Asians. Once again, we'll throw in Immolation for good measure, and lots of Morbid Angel. Check this out. Awesome album. Definitely going to be jamming this a lot more this year. I don't know. It could be year-end material. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff that seems like it's in contention, but yeah, this is pretty badass. Cystic, Palace of Shadows. This is the first full length from the Seattle-based death metal act. Features Julian Ria of Mortiferum and Fetid on drums. That was honestly one of the reasons why I decided to check this out, because anything like Mortiferum or Fetid adjacent, I'm definitely willing to check out. And this is pretty solid, like kind of straight up death metal. Like it definitely has its touches of atmosphere. The opening intro Vista is, you know, lush acoustic melodies and waves and rain. And you feel like you're being like kind of like lulled into something that's going to be very melancholic and somber overall. And then it just absolutely kicks down the door with like just old school death metal riffage, lots of double time grooves. Vocally, it kind of almost sounds, you know, a little bit more blackened, like you kind of get that mid-range scream rather than a growl. The snare on this album sounds like dude's chopping down a fucking tree. I like the tone, but at times it does feel like it's a little bit loud. But I mean, the main thing on here is groove and riffs, and this album is absolutely chock full of them. When it's not chugging along at like a good mid-tempo pace or breaking out in some D-beats, there are some really solid death doom moments on here. And when it shifts gears to death doom, it gets appropriately dreary. It kind of revisits the vibe that it kind of kicks off with the intro and actually the outro as well. Pestilential Thralls Throne, the title track, and Nebulous Legion of the Somber Sea all have these lurching, just kind of dreary death doom breaks. The title track in particular has this like just flat out old school descending tritone that always just kind of like, you know, rings the dinner bell for fucking doom in my mind. And at points those moments kind of embody the whole like peaceful death doom sound where it sounds a little bit more, you know, melodic, a little bit more like gothic tinged. But the main thing on here is, again, like just riffs, groove, and a fair amount of atmosphere. Like this sounds very dreary and very creepy at times. It doesn't come across as like super aggressive. Like it definitely has its more like, you know, mean kind of just biting sections. But for the most part, there's just this kind of overwhelming sense of just dread throughout it. It kind of reminded me a bit of Ulthar, but not as like, you know, savage on the riffs, like, because that band is just absolutely nuts with its riff construction. These are a little bit more straightforward. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call them straight up like meat and potatoes death metal, but it's kind of close to that. But yeah, if you're a big fan of, God man, I would say like, you know, early Paradise Lost, early My Dying Bride, there's definitely that in there. But also, you know, there's some stuff in here that's very similar to like, well, more Tifrum, but also, you know, some straight up like kind of like Jungle Rot and Obituary style grooves too. Check this out. Pretty solid stuff. Insinneratehymn, Irreverence of the Divine. This is the third album from this California-based death metal act. Their name is an obvious reference for Deicide fans. Again, not the best Deicide album to reference, but in terms of one that works for a band name, probably the best one. Now, I enjoyed this band's last one, Disembodied, and I saw this one and I was like, oh wow, that looks like, well, an Immolation album cover instead of a Deicide album cover, but whatever. I already know this is going to sound a lot like Deicide, mainly because that's what the last one sounded like. And yeah, this is some straight up thrashy, Floridian style death metal. It's fast paced, it's explosive, it's blasphemous, and it's not subtle about it, much like Deicide. The vocals kind of sound like Glenn a bit. Honestly, it kind of sounds a bit like, you know, Barnes back when he had, you know, vocal cords. But yeah, this album is just out to fucking throttle you. The pace on this is blistering. You have good pockets of like thrashy, galloping grooves. Like, honestly, kind of reminds me a bit of like Skeletal Remains, which at one point this band shared a member with Skeletal Remains. But to be fair, Skeletal Remains has a lot of ex-members at this point. But when it's not grooving, it is blasting. And it's generally that like kind of old school, very thrashy blast. Like the drum performance is very similar to Steve from, you know, Deicide as well. Sounds like Cosmic Abominations, God, Visage of the Infinite, Covenant of the Virtuous. All of these songs just have vicious, gnarly, thrashy riffs. There's even some points in here where it's just like straight up aping Slayer a bit, and I mean, it totally fucking works. And production-wise, I really like the sound of this album, especially in the drums, because this has like more of a 90s sound. Like the drums don't sound triggered at all. They have a very natural sound. Like there's no clicky bass drum. The snare has a good thwack to it. And the drum performance on this album is absolutely killer. But yeah, across the board, I mean, I felt as though I had heard this album years ago, but at the same time, it's one of those fun sort of like retroactive listens, especially if you're a Deicide fan and you just like that style of thrashy death metal, like, you know, them and Vader and Malevolent Creation. So this album is not winning like any points for originality, but I mean, it is still an absolutely fun listen, and it is blisteringly heavy and vicious from start to finish. Like there really is not a lull in energy on here. And if that's what you like about, well, Deicide, unless it's, you know, in Torment and Hell and Insinneratehymn, then you'll probably dig this. I mean, also, again, if you're a fan of like Malevolent Creation, I would also say Solstice at certain points. It kind of has a death thrash vibe and, you know, certain songs in here. But yeah, check this out. I think the album before it might have been a little bit better, but this is still really good. And yeah, if you're a Deicide fan, I feel like you should at least, you know, give it a couple of spins. All right, we have a pair here from Acid Rain. We have their first album, and this also includes their first EP, Moshkinstein, The Fear. And we have their second full-length, Obnoxious, as illustrated here by this just glowing, terrible pink fucking album cover. Now, it's a good thing I didn't judge these by their album covers because, well, neither one on here is great. In fact, we have a big case of album cover versus content on this one, because this is a UK thrash band. They put out these 2 albums and then broke up for a long period of time and have recently reunited. And apparently that new one, it seems like it got some glowing reviews. I'm going to have to check it out because I really enjoyed, well, all right, mostly this one. I still enjoyed this one, but I'm definitely favoring this. I initially went into this thinking it was going to be kind of hokey, like, I don't know, kind of like, you know, Lawnmower Death and shit like that, which I appreciate that band's sense of humor, but sometimes it doesn't translate into the songs. But while the goofy opening track, You Never Know, which is more or less just like a little 25-second skit, I was kind of preparing myself for just kind of goofy crossover thrash. But holy shit, this album is an absolute fucking riff storm. This reminded me a lot of Anthrax, but also Sacred Reich. Like, it's got, you know, crossover energy, but the songs are longer. They're a little bit more elaborate when it comes down the riff work. And man, the transitions when it goes from, like, you know, rapid fire machine gun riffs and DB gallops to these just absolutely killer grooves. Dude, this album is fucking smooth. Like, everything just keeps momentum going, and I fucking love it. This band is silly and serious at the same time, and I really like that. Like, the songs are very clever, and you can hear them shift into like a more serious mode in terms of the music and then just kind of go off and have fun. Like Humanoia, I think that song has some really clever breakdowns. There's some fun extra percussion on it. Lost in Solitude has like a lot of these fun tempo shifts. There's some flat out like Slayer machine gun sections on there. I dug every track in here, and that goes for the Moshkenstein EP as well, which was just like a little bit more raw and I mean, just as much fun. Like, these guys were really clever songwriters. The vocals also were really good on here, too. Like, the dude kind of has this, like, sort of, like, halfway point between, like, you know, a straight-up thrash shout and actually singing. And the fact that there's, like, a little bit of melody to kind of match up with the guitar harmonies in here. That kind of gives it, like, a little bit more in terms of, like, a deeper listen. But, yeah, this is absolutely fantastic and a prime example not to judge a book by its cover, because this album cover is ridiculous with the toothless granny that is holding a double barrel shotgun, and I don't think she's quite holding it right. I don't know. This album cover is wonky, but this one's wonkier. And this one, all right, I like it. Like, it's got some really clever writing on it. It's a little bit more groove laden, but it also feels a little bit more directionless. Like, they kind of took the cleverness and went too far with it. I'm also not a big fan of the production on here. Like, the vocals sound like the dude's like kind of like yelling through like a toilet paper roll. Like, they just sound odd. You know, it's still got good riffs. It still has clever transitions, but I feel like it was trying too hard to be, you know, a little bit more off kilter, a little bit obnoxious, I guess. You have 2 tracks over 9 minutes on here too, which this one I think had like an 8-minute song, which was really solid, but one of the 9-minute songs is Phantasm, and it is 100% about the movie. So they took the whole Entomb break and went a little bit further with it. That song is pretty decent. I do feel at points like it's kind of wandering and, you know, a little stitched together at points, and sometimes the vocals feel like they're kind of searching for a hook. But Codes of Conformity is probably the biggest oddity on here. Like, there's funk breaks, there's a section where they just go full bore Alvin and the Chipmunks with the whole vocal modulation. Again, like, there's good ideas on here, and when this album's on it, it's on it. But when it comes down to, like, the stuff that's off the wall, it's just, I don't know, like, kind of like derailing momentum throughout the album. Honestly, it reminds me of Wrathchild America's second album, 3D, except not nearly as good. Like, I really like that album. This album, again, at times just feels, well, again, obnoxious. Maybe that was the idea. I mean, it kind of had to be. But overall, I enjoyed both, and this was my first experience with Acid Rain. And yeah, I think I'm going to find that third album just to see what it sounds like, because really dig the shit out of this. Like, this is a legit thrash gem. And this is an obnoxious and kind of fun album that followed it up. I guess that's, like, you know, not the worst thing I could say about it, but it's definitely not the most glowing review. I don't know, it's just a weird album. Either way, kind of a long overdue listen, but yeah, dig them. And yeah, if you're a big fan of, again, like Anthrax, Wrathchild America, maybe like a little bit of Voivod at times, I don't know, just weird, like, kind of all over the place thrash. Check them out. Believer, Sanity Obscure. This is the second album from this Pennsylvania-based progressive / technical thrash metal act / Christian thrash metal act. Musically kind of like Atheist, except, they go to church. Or at least they did. I believe their themes, later on started, pushing well past the bounds of, Christian metal themes and started getting a little bit more philosophical and existential, I guess. Anyway, the last time I went to Maryland in 2024, I actually picked up 2 of their albums. Their third album, Dimensions, and their first album, Extraction from Mortality. And I really enjoyed Extraction from Mortality. That album absolutely whoops ass. Vicious, thrashy, technical, kind of everything I was looking for. And then Dimensions was wildly more experimental, and especially the last half where it was essentially one song broken into 4 different suites, and it was kind of all over the place. You had operatic vocals and a lot of these very strange proggy sections where it felt almost like avant-garde. And I saw this one, I was like, all right, this is the in-between album. I kind of wonder if this is the big transitional one. And it kind of is. It kind of favors the first one, where it is definitely more just straight up thrashy. The guitar tone in here is chunky thrash overdrive. It's just got this mega thrash crunch that you kind of look for in a lot of 80s and 90s thrash. And while the opening track does kind of kick off with almost Nintendo sounds, once it gets down to business, it is just chunkified. It's very aggressive. But unlike the first album, riff-wise, you can definitely hear that they're exploring more technical song structures, a lot of these twisting, crawling riffs everywhere, stuff that I would compare to bands like Watchtower. I would even say some later Death on here too, stuff from Human or Symbolic. Some really clever drum work and off-time grooves and songs like Wisdom's Call, Stop the Madness. And you still have just thrashy barn burners on here, Nonpoint in particular, which I wonder if that's where that band got their name. I don't know, I kind of doubt it. Dust to Dust, and one of my personal favorites, Idols of Ignorance. That song is absolute fucking banger. It definitely shows up their more aggressive side, but again, in terms of songwriting, you can definitely tell that this is, progressing towards something way different. And towards the end of the album, I believe the technical, more progressive aspects really start taking over. There's also a little bit in the way of more atmosphere in here, which atmosphere really kind of took over on Dimensions in terms of samples and setups and that sort of thing. Stop the Madness is definitely about drugs. In fact, the opening of that song, I feel like it offered me a rail of coke. It's a really long setup too, with the drug dealer fucking getting the guy hooked on the product and all that. And I get it, it's good subject matter, but I feel like they kind of lay into it a little bit too much. And then Dies Irae, Day of Wrath. This is where I can hear this band really start to shift, because this one includes operatic vocals. And I feel like this song was the teaser in terms of them, pushing their sound in a more progressive direction, because this is almost like a smaller sample size of what they did on Dimensions towards the back half with the very long mega song at the end. To a degree, though, I kind of appreciate the symphonic / operatic elements in that song, and honestly, part of me was thinking, man, is this what Metallica's S&M was supposed to sound like? Provided they hadn't written Load and Reload and were trying to incorporate that material in there. Maybe? I don't know. There's also a U2 cover on there, Like a Song, which is alright. Overall, I like this album. I like it when they're full bore, into their heavier side. Again, Idols of Ignorance, there's stuff on there that kind of reminds me of Creator's Extreme Aggression, which I fucking love that album. But it's when they kind of get off the rails, I don't know, it doesn't always gel. I appreciate the ambition and forward thinking of it, but sometimes musically it just didn't land. So out of all the stuff I've heard by Believer, which now I have all of their full lengths, I definitely favor the first one probably the most. But overall, I think this band's pretty solid, and this is a pretty decent album. Honestly, this might be my second favorite out of all of them. It's still got good, thrashy, chunky riffs on it, good, aggressive songs. And again, if you're a fan of Atheist, Watchtower, I throw in again Creator too, check this out. Really solid album. Critical Defiance, No Life Forms. This is the second album from this Chilean thrash metal act. I became a fan of them with their last album, The Search Won't Fail. That album was actually pretty close to making my year-end list, but Yeah, I enjoyed it, and, you know, I wanted to check out more by this band, and this is kind of like a more, like, dialed-down version of that last album, where the last album, you know, I felt like the songs were a little bit longer, a little bit more grand. The songs in here are shorter, and I feel like this is, like, twice as aggressive. The drum performance on here is fucking exhausting. Like, this dude is doing a lot of, like, those, like, single kick, like, thrashy blasts throughout the entire album. There are points where I feel like he was on the verge of losing control or like collapsing behind the kit during these takes, because it is such an aggressive performance. Like, he's just beating the shit out of this kit at Mach 10. But he has to, because the songs are going absolutely nuts with machine gun riff after machine gun riff. Virtually every song on here is a fucking barn burner. A World Crumbling Apart, The Last Crusaders, Bringers of Death, Altering Senses, Edge of Consciousness. All of these songs are just fast as hell. There's a few songs in here where they do kind of slow it up, and there are some really tasteful instrumentals too. But for the most part, this is just hyper aggressive, but it's not just like one note, which I really like. Like, this definitely has like a similar gear that they're in terms of the speed, but there's a lot of killer lead trade-offs on all these songs. You know, they're quick, they're short, but they're melodic and tasteful. The vocals match that sort of like rapid fire aggression as the riffs, and the bass playing on this album is probably like low-key like the secret weapon that just kept surprising me, because throughout this album, all of a sudden, behind these like maniacal, fast-paced, explosive riffs and shit, you'd hear these like tasteful, fun bass noodles and almost leads, honestly. It's either on Elephant or We Were Never Here to Stay that there's a really cool drum and bass intro, and that bass melody is like just clever, it's infectious, it's almost very proggy, like something you would expect from, I don't know, like Steve DiGiorgio or something like that. You can also hear it a little bit more in points where they actually slow down, like Dying Breath is probably one of the more groovy songs. It's still pretty damn fast, but when the guitars are kind of like slowing down and maybe like strumming on like some single chords or doing some harmonies, you can just hear, again, like underneath it, like these wild bass licks that are just catchier than hell. But yeah, this album is just fierce. I would say it borders on death thrash at points, especially Kill 'Em With Kindness, which, I don't know, I imagine kindness is probably a giant, like, fucking axe with the word kindness engraved in it. Very akin to, like, Demolition Hammer, early Sepultura, Sadus, early Creator 2. Yeah, I dig the shit out of this album. I don't know if it's as good as the last one, but this is pretty damn good. If you're a fan of any of those bands, strongly recommend checking out this one. I definitely want to check out their first album too. If it's anything like this, I'm going to love it. So yeah, check it out. Good stuff. Dark Suns, Swanlike. This is the debut album from this German progressive death metal act. Now I'm familiar with like their later work, or at least like some of the albums that came after this, Grave, Human, Genuine, and Orange, which I would describe as a little bit more just like prog metal rather than progressive death metal. Now this one, Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades has been recommending to me for years, because he said, dude, it sounds almost just like Opeth. And I saw this one in the used bin over at Soundgarden, snagged it. He gushed like, oh my God, that sounds just like Opeth. It's like, I know, you told me like forever ago, actually multiple times. And he's absolutely right. This 100% sounds like Opeth, especially circa like Blackwater Park and Still Life. Maybe like a little bit of like Amorphous mixed in here too, and like Disillusion, but Opeth is very apparent right from the rip. The opening track, Swanlike, is over 10 minutes long, and you have lush acoustic melodies giving way to heavier sections, clean vocal harmonies that are very Ockerfeltian to growls that are very Ockerfeltian. I like that. I feel like we've turned that into a word. This album is also over an hour long and has long, lavish, songs that go across, a multitude of different sort of transitions from heavy biting sections where you get a lot of like pummeling drum work and more death metal leaning riffs to, again, like kind of folky, acoustic, dreary passages. It sounds like Blackwater Park. It isn't to the point where it sounds just like it. Like, if you played this for an Opeth fan, they're gonna notice it sounds like Opeth, but it's not so much that it is like indistinguishable between the two. But I'll also say that if you asked, Alexa or Siri or whatever AI spy that watches your house is, if you ask them to translate Blackwater Park to German, it would just play this fucking album. Now, while I like this because I like Opeth, it's kind of hard for me to not compare it to Opeth because I feel like that was the big, inspiration behind this. It's not as good. First off, production-wise, they didn't have the help of Steven Wilson to make it sound, lush and incredible and very crisp. This, it sounds a little bit more, gritty at times. I would say the drum production, I'm not a fan of the way the drums sound on here. They just have an odd sound. The guitars have a good tone. Vocally, not quite there in terms of how flat out catchy, the vocals are in Opeth. Both in terms of the growls and the clean vocals. The clean harmonies at points on here can sound a little bit flat. But outside of that, there are some moments on here that do kind of step a little bit outside of the Opeth sound. I mean, kinda. The Sun Beyond Your Eden. That song, I feel, is a little bit more Death Doom-lated. There's a little bit more Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Anathema sort of vibes to it where, it has somber, more melancholic, melodies across the board. It's a little bit slower at points. Inside Final Dreams is also a big standout. It's a little bit softer. You get these beautiful, clean melodies, and behind it you have, sounds of whale songs and waves. It's almost like Gojira covering Pink Floyd. You have the delayed guitar effects, but it still gets pretty heavy and pretty syncopated later on. And the song The Never Ending has some of the catchiest vocal harmonies on the entire album. But yeah, overall this was really good. I feel maybe Jeff overhyped it a little bit in terms of it being pretty on par with Opeth. I mean, it definitely sounds like it, but in terms of some of the music, it doesn't quite reach the heights of Opeth, but it's still really good. And honestly, I kind of prefer this over the other albums I own by them. This band I kind of gave multiple shots with the 2 albums I got and was it's not quite there yet, but at the same time, I haven't jammed in a while. Maybe it's time to go revisit those. Either way, if you're a big fan of Opeth and maybe a little bit of the peaceful Death Doom sound, as well as, a little bit of Amorphous and Piamater. I can't remember how to pronounce that band's name, but also very similar to them too. Check this out. Pretty solid listen. Alright, these next 3 are by the same band, and it's a band that I own, I've been a fan of for years, and they've been putting out these reissues, and I had to pounce on them. And that band is Edge of Sanity. We have Elegy Chapter 1 here, which is probably the one that I was most excited about getting because this is a demo collection. And I have never heard the demos for any of Edge of Sanity stuff, and I've been an Edge of Sanity fan for quite a while now. Now, the interesting thing about these reissues is it contains both a remaster and a remix by Dan Swano, because who else is gonna remix and remaster Dan Swano stuff? That's obviously the best fucking guy to do it, and to his credit, I think he's just about as amazing behind a fucking mixing board as he is in terms of just being an outstanding musician. So I checked the remastered disc out, and both of them have the same tracks, I believe, but there's a lot more tracks on the remastered version, and it sounds, like a 90s death metal demo, except, a little bit more cleaned up. Dan's growls were so fucking good. That dude, he's a talented vocalist across the board, but I've always loved his growls. He's just got a well-enunciated roar. Riff work is fucking killer. Now, a lot of the material in these demos is stuff that showed up on their first album, Nothing But Death Remains, so I'm pretty familiar with it, but hearing some of the more raw versions and hearing how much heavier they were, man, the Kurnagia demo from 1990, that's probably one of the heaviest things this band has ever released. But I'll be honest, hearing the remixed CD, it sounds even better. The dynamic range sounds bigger, it sounds more full. I would say the remaster feels a little bit compressed. It feels a little bit more natural. If you wanted the just, glorious sound of an old school 90s demo, go with the remaster. It does sound a little bit cleaned up, but compared to the remix sounds much more crisp. But it still has all that discernible grit. The songs just kind of jump out more. There's less tracks on it, they don't cover as much, but the main one that I really wanted, the Kurnagia demo, is on there in its entirety. And in terms of which disc I'll probably listen to, it's probably going to be the second one. But yeah, this is just absolutely disgusting. And this contains some stuff I had never actually jammed before, and yeah, I feel enlightened now that I have heard some of like the earliest, grittiest stuff from this fucking amazing band. So yeah, absolutely killer stuff. And then the next one, I mean, very familiar with this one, their third album, The Spectral Sorrows. Maybe my favorite Edge of Sanity album? I don't know. This was the first one I ever got into. I was absolutely fucking hooked, and yeah, this almost kind of found like its weird balance between my love of Melodeath and my love of like the Stockholm like HM2 sound, because honestly, it's kind of the bridge. Now this one was weird because I own this album. I have a Black Mark edition, which I have jammed that one to death. And I mean, in terms of like comparing both discs on here, because this does have a remix and a remaster done separately, once again by Dan Swano, duh. But going back and listening to my Black Mark one, because I wanted to compare all three, honestly, I kind of prefer the mix on the Black Mark one. It's not that this sounds bad, it just doesn't sound different enough, I guess, from the version that I have to really say like, oh, I absolutely needed this. And comparing the remix to the remaster, they don't feel necessarily that different. Like, there's some differences. I mean, I feel like the drums sound a little bit different on the remix versus the remaster, but overall, you get that good, snarly, vicious tone. Dan's vocals, again, sound absolutely killer. In terms of like the one that sounds closer to the version I already own, it's probably the remaster. But I was gonna snag this. I love this album. It's worth owning, well, technically 3 times since this is a 2-disc one. No real extras on this one. You just have the remaster and remix of the same album. It's still definitely worth owning for sure. But yeah, killer album. I mean, most people fucking know this album. If you don't, you definitely should, because it's amazing. But then the third one I got was Infernal, their 6th album, which this is an album that I've never actually listened to. Outside of Crimson 2, I really don't have much past the original Crimson, which, spoiler alert, that'll probably pop up in a collection update not too long after this one. But I never jammed this album, and honestly, I really hadn't heard much about it, and I would say that this album is, I don't know, like I wouldn't call it like their death and roll gamble or a flat out Melodeath album. It does feel kind of uneven. I feel like this was just a lot of different stuff that Dan Swano was working on, possibly not with Edge of Sanity fully in mind, but it kind of just ended up that way, if that makes any sense. That probably wasn't the case, but this album is really uneven. Like, you have snarling, biting, and nasty songs, Helter Skelter, Forever, Together Forever, you know, a little bit more of that, you know, thrashy, sort of like, you know, more aggressive sound, but there's a lot of stuff in here that I would say kind of leans into like just flat out melodic death metal. And this came out in 1997, and Melodeath was, you know, starting to really gain some momentum around then. You had some serious landmark releases with, you know, Jester Race and Slaughter of the Soul. But this also has, you know, stuff that I would almost say is like kind of groove metal-ish. Like not full-bore like nu metal or anything like that, but there's stuff on here that just kind of feels like stock US groove metal. And honestly, it kind of hampered this album in terms of like a full-on listen, because I would find myself, you know, really latching onto a certain track, and then the next track just felt like it was almost a completely different, you know, project altogether. Like one song, Dan's roaring his guts out. You have these just nasty, chuggy riffs with good melodic accents. He's always got a solid ear for melody. But then the next song, it would kind of feel like a sludgy groove metal song where he's kind of, I mean, I feel like he's punching below his weight considering all the stuff that he's done. So the flow of the album feels very disjointed. And then you have the last song, which is called The Last Song. That's convenient. And this one, I don't know what the idea behind it was, because it's a soft piano ballad for part of it. It almost sounds like a extra gloomy Elton John song, and I kind of thought like, all right, hey, that's maybe just like a good somber, reflective way to end the album, and then it just shifts into heavier material midway through the song, and the transition just feels disjointed, like they mashed 2 completely different songs together, and it just didn't work. And that's, again, like kind of this album, like it's just really uneven. When it's good, it's really solid, and when it's not, it just it doesn't even feel like Edge of Sanity, honestly. Now, in terms of the bonus disc on here, it doesn't just have a remix and remaster. You just have one remaster and then a demo collection from 1996 and some live tracks, which I think is pretty cool. Like, you know, I know the Crimson one just has a remix and remaster. So it's good that some of these have their own appeal in terms of, like, you know, different stuff. And the demos sound pretty solid, even though I'm just not the biggest fan of the stuff they're demoing. But yeah, like anything, I urge you to check it out, form your own opinions. This was just sort of an odd listen for me. I mean, I know which Edge of Sanity albums I like jamming the most, and I don't think this one's going to be in that rotation as much, but I'll still come back to it every now and then just to check out the tracks I like. So yeah, check it out. Fractal Universe, The Great Filters. This is the fourth album from this French progressive, technical death metal act. I've been a fan of this band since Rhizomes of Insanity, their second album, and their last album, The Impossible Horizon. I thought, honestly, it was their best piece of work so far. So I was pretty excited about this one, and this was one we intended on doing a full-on review for. We just didn't have time. And this is pretty good. I don't think it's as good as the last two, but I still think it's really solid. This band is just amazing when it comes down to their songwriting. Like, lots of cool syncopated heavy riffs. It kind of borders on that genty territory. Like, there's stuff on here that definitely reminds me of Tesseract, but it also goes into, like, you know, very alkaloid-ish territory, occasionally cynic as well. Very melodic, very layered, lots of crazy transitions, great drum play across this entire album. The atmosphere is very lush and very cosmic. It has like a sort of warmth to it overall. I dig a lot of the stuff this band does. But on this album, I feel like the one thing that was, you know, kind of a detractor really came to the forefront in here, and that are the vocals. The vocals aren't necessarily bad, like in terms of like being able to sing in key and carry a tune. It's just they're very, very nasal. Like, the dude sounds like he was singing with a sinus infection and both nostrils were completely plugged up. And, man, it really hampers the hooks in here because, you know, music-wise, this band has melody all over the place, whether it's, you know, very straightforward, like heavy, lush strumming, or really intricate, techie parts. The Seed of Singularity has these great bending, lurching riffs. It's a little bit more heavy and menacing, and you know, you get some good melodies in there too to kind of like balance it out. But the vocals really just, I don't know, they put me off on like all the songs. When it comes down to the harsher vocals, I think they're pretty good. Like, they're good, solid roars and such. You know, a little Gojira-esque, which, I mean, there's definitely some Gojira-like hooks on here. But despite how good the music was whenever the vocals came on, I kind of felt myself like trying to ignore them. But despite how good the music was, and again, it's great at being lush and melodic and atmospheric, but also complex and, you know, occasionally just very vicious, the vocals kind of just took me out of it. And it's weird because I didn't really have that much of an issue with the last two. Like, yeah, they didn't always sound the best, but especially on the Impossible Horizon, like, everything on that album I thought sounded really good. Like, if I was going to recommend an album by this band to really check out, it would probably be that one. Not saying this one doesn't have a lot of like awesome qualities to it, but yeah, if you like bands like Cynic, Tesseract, Alkaloid especially, you know, just kind of stuff like that. It definitely has its like genty appeal occasionally. I would even say Haken is kind of close too. Check this album out. Pretty solid listen. Again, the vocals might not have been my thing, but the music in here, pretty damn solid. My Dying Bride, a line of Deathless Kings. This is the 9th album from these Death Doom legends. That is only patching up the holes in my collection when it comes down to My Dying Bride. I remembered years ago hearing the song To Remain Tombless on a compilation and going, man, that sounds awesome. And subsequently just not picking it up because I got distracted by probably another song on that same compilation and went after that. But I found this one at Soundgarden and it was like, yeah, let's just fucking snag it. And this album's pretty awesome. A little bit different. Like, this is still, I feel like it's kind of coming off the whole, like, stripping out a lot of the death roars and being a little bit more, I wouldn't say like goth rock, but like goth metal centric. But this definitely brings back heavy, doomy guitars. God, the fucking guitar harmonies on here. It's akin to just weeping at times. And of course that's, coupled by Aaron's just absolutely dreary croning. And dude sounds like he's on his last legs on every song, just mourning and lamenting every fucking possible thing, which is exactly what I want him to do. I will say that this has very few growls on here. This is mostly clean vocals, which I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting, some more of his just like awesome gravelly growls. You get a couple here and there, and, a nice little surprise at the end of The Blood, the Wine, the Roses, where all of a sudden it just breaks into like D beats and him growling his guts out for the last 20 seconds of a song that's, I believe, over 10 minutes long. The production on this thing is absolutely amazing, and this is an era that I definitely need more from, because this is where Hamish and Andrew were the principal guitarists and songwriters, and my God, did they combine for some absolutely just soul-crushing riffs, but beautiful melodies. The guitar harmonies in here are so goddamn good. This is also a period where they didn't have like extra strings. The synths on here are mostly in the back of the mix overall, which honestly, they're good there. They kind of like just add to the atmosphere a bit. A lot of this is really driven by the riffs and Aaron's just mournful fucking defeated vocals. There's some really cool like throat singing occasionally too. Deeper Down was kind of an interesting track because it feels like it has like a weird contrast to it. Like the vocals were not meant for that song, because that song feels way more aggressive. You get some more double time rhythms, and Aaron's, he's not growling over it. And I feel like he kind of should have been growling over it on that one. That's probably the one time in this album where it doesn't work. But outside of that, like I dig pretty much every song on here. It's woeful. It's just joyless. It's a musical gray cloud that follows you and rains on you, and that's exactly kind of what I want from My Dying Bride. I mean, if you're a longtime fan, you probably know this album. If you're not, God, man, in terms of like comparing it, like, I don't know, kind of the usual suspects: Paradise Lost, Catatonia, early Anathema. Just check this album out. And honestly, if you're still new to My Dying Bride overall, just start checking out albums and get wickedly depressed listening to this stuff, because that's probably what's going to happen. Alright, we have a couple here from Necrotic. We have their first album, Putrid Death Sorcery, and a compilation called Bestial Rites, which covers EPs and demos that came out between 2009 and 2012. This is a French blackened death metal act. I've become a big fan of this band over the last few years. The Ones from Hell I thought was a really solid album in 2020, but it was their last album, Swords of Dajjal, which just fucking slayed. Like, it was a year-ender for me, and honestly, unless Melikesh shows up and delivers an absolute banger of an album, these guys have kind of like taken over that spot in terms of like Middle Eastern themed blackened death metal or black metal that Melikesh has done, I would say, like pretty much perfectly for years. So I had never heard any of their earlier stuff, and I saw these two and I was like, yeah, no, it's just fucking time. I've liked everything I've heard from them, and this is a bit different. And I'm gonna start with the debut here. Man, this is way more like death metal centric in terms of like the production. Like the guitars are thicker. They don't have that like kind of gainy cold sound that you expect from more like black metal. Like this has like a more robust, hefty death metal tone. So when it comes down to the tremolos on here, because they have a little bit more depth to them, it sounds more death metal leaning. The production here is murkier and filthier overall, and this just sounds outright fucking savage. This just feels more aggressive. Like there's definitely a lot of atmosphere and a lot of melody on here, but it's decidedly more like visceral and aggressive. Like this sounds like a combination of Necrophobic and Black Curse. Like if you found the sweet spot between those two bands, which, I mean, there's a little bit of an overlap, but not much, honestly. But if you had that sort of like more raw, aggressive approach that Black Curse has, but also mixing in with the melodic nuances of Necrophobic, you would have this album. The pace of this album is nuts. It is pretty much blast beats through and through. You do get some groovier pockets, slower, murkier, more like lurching melodies every now and then, but a lot of this is just fucking going. The thing that I really latched on to was just the outright intensity in here. I mean, yeah, this has got killer riffs. The dynamics are solid, but I will say that this band has become like better songwriters as they've grown older. Their new material definitely has like more nuance and more musicality to it. This is just outright vicious aggression. You do get some like more wide-reaching songs on here that, you know, push outside of like the blasty, just vicious attack on here. Impious Plague in Catacombs has a really cool, like murky lead in. It's very gloomy, very haunting overall. Like it legit sounds like it might have been recorded in a catacomb. Soiled into a Crypt just reeks of Morbid Angel. Like the riffs definitely take on way more of the death metal sound overall. And I absolutely love the creepy breakdown on the Anthropomancer. That's a very made-up word. But yeah, this album is absolutely killer. I kind of like this just like more stripped down, go for the throat approach on here, you know, in comparison to the later albums, but I prefer the later albums for, again, like the more lavish songwriting. And getting back to the more raw sound, Bistro writes here, this is a compilation of demos and EPs they put out, and this is them at their most raw. 100%. This sounds way more polished and refined versus this. I will say that the early material in here, especially the 2 EPs contained, Putrefactive Infestation and Now You're in Hell, definitely more of a death metal tinge to it. In fact, riff-wise, you don't get a lot of like the, you know, more black end, like heavy strumming stuff. It's a lot of just like chunky, nasty, kind of thrashy death metal. Production-wise, it's definitely murkier, it's definitely more raw, kind of muddy at points. They do throw in some fun covers on here, though. They cover Merciless, which is a band that I still need to get familiar with. They do an absolutely killer cover of Death's Zombie Ritual, one of my personal favorites. And they do a cover of Supposed to Rot, which I guess they listed it as the Nihilist version. I mean, I know it as Nihilist. I also know it as Entombed. Either way, they covered another one of my favorite bands, and they did a really solid job. But yeah, this is definitely like more odds and ends, I would say. I mean, most compilations are, but I dig it. I kind of like hearing this, you know, versus this in terms of a sense of evolution, and listening to all their stuff, which I'm eventually going to get all their other albums because I've liked everything I've heard. I kind of like the promise of like a sense of evolution between the albums and such. But yeah, both of these are pretty damn killer. This one wins hands down between the two of them, though. Like, there's not a song on here I would skip. It is riffy fucking evil madness, and that's exactly what I signed up for. There's some pretty cool stuff in here too. Again, some of it is like really muddy and really murky, but I mean, overall, I dig it. Like, these guys are just a fucking killer band overall. So yeah, if you're a big fan of, again, Melichesh, Necrophobic, definitely a bit of like Morbid Angel on here, and like, you know, maybe Malevolent Creation, like definitely more thrashy death metal. Check both of these out, but I mean, if I was gonna recommend one for sure, just in terms of an album, this one absolutely fucking kills. But yeah, just check out the band in general. Everything I've heard from this band so far has been awesome, and I expect that trend to continue. Temple of the Fuzz Witch, Red Tide. This is the second album from this Detroit-based stoner doom act. I actually saw these guys at the Ohio Stone and Doom Fest, God, many moons ago. I don't know if that's even like pre-COVID. That might have been pre-COVID. Holy shit. Anyway, I was kind of surprised to find this in Baltimore, of all places, and not in like the tri-state area, because I mean, kind of outside the Midwest, I don't know how well known this band is, but this is just some gnarly, dark, sludgy, doomy stoner doom. Very much along the lines of like Electric Wizard, Monolord, stuff like that. Big droning riffs, lots of lumbering grooves. You kind of have that very Monolord, Electric Wizard sort of like vocal delivery where it's like, you know, kind of ghostly, a little bit of reverb on it. But I mean, the strength of, I think, any stoner doom album is in its riffs and the tone and production, because this is a subset of metalheads that are fucking tone chasers. And I can tell you live, these guys absolutely crush. Like, I felt every riff move through me. And I got their first album at the show, and I thought it was pretty solid, but this is a big improvement, especially in terms of production. It's bigger, it's bolder. I felt like the bass and guitars in the first one kind of blended into a bit of a wall of mud. Like, it wasn't terrible, but this one, there is some clear separation, and they complement one another really well. And this also shows a little bit more dynamic in their sound. Like, yeah, a good chunk of this is about that lumbering, syncopated, droning sort of vibe that you get from stonerdoom. But there's some interesting wrinkles that kind of opens this album up a little bit more. Like Trenikoff Light, the second track, there's these really cool clean tones that are harmonizing with synths, and you get something that sounds like police chatter in the background, but it's this really cool like melodic build up to these big heavy riffs. And honestly, the vocals on this song in particular kind of sound a little Alice in Chains-ish. They're still a little bit flat, but they have improved overall. And the more this album went on, I could really start hearing more of that like hefty blues rock sort of underbelly to the album. Cimmerian and the others in particular, like there's just some good old school, like very Sabbathy blues rock with that just heavy tone. And some of the swings and grooves on there, like it kind of picks up a little bit outside of like the plodding pace of, I mean, most stoner doom albums. And there are like a few legit up-tempo moments. The end of the others, the end of the last track, the ungoliant. I'm still not entirely sure what that word means. You get more aggressive riffs in terms of like heavier chugs on Agony, but Cimmerian was one of my big standouts because, man, that one is like the trippy desert rock song. And there's a certain sort of mood that good desert rock generates. Like it's a setting like that, driving in the open desert, seeing mountains on the horizon. You get that like super trippy vibe. This one, they use a lot of like delayed guitars and blend them with the synths. It just creates this really cool vibe that I know 100% bands like Fu Manchu and Caius have created before, but when it's done well, who cares who's done it before? It just sounds great. But yeah, this was a really cool find. I think they have one other album that I'm missing, and from what I hear, that one's a little bit different too. But yeah, if you love Monolord, Mars Red Sky, Caius, definitely Electric Wizard, check this out. Pretty solid stuff. Tomorrow's Rain, Hollow. This is the debut album from this Israeli gothic death doom act. This was actually given to me by one of our buddies, Lev. I believe we've met up with him every year. We've been to MDF, always a good time catching up with him. And he picked this one up for me and said, hey, this has become like one of my favorite death doom albums. I'd love for you to check it out. I'd never heard of this band before, but he also said, oh yeah, by the way, there's two different versions of this, and I gave you the Hebrew version. Now, to be fair, there are 3 tracks on here in English. Luckily, they're all in a row. Into the Mouth of Madness, Hollow, and The Weeping. Everything else is in Hebrew, and it's printed in Hebrew. So I can't tell you the names of them or what they're talking about. I can tell you that, oddly enough, all of the letters look like they're upside down. I don't know. I haven't looked at Hebrew in print in a long time. Anyway, this is pretty solid. I would say Gothic Death Doom is pretty accurate in terms of describing their sound. You know, you have heavy synths and droning riffs and the whole air of melancholy on here, but there's a lot of like, I would say, you know, folk influences, like in terms of the cultural influences of their country, or at least the area. Well, you have like a lot of big, heavy, chunky riffs. There's also a lot of acoustic play. There's also additional production, multiple vocalists on here. I believe you have at least 2 on here, one doing primarily a lot of the growls, and when it comes down to like the cleans, it's almost like a spoken word. And again, I can't understand anything they're saying, at least on the Hebrew tracks. But the songs are long, they're drawn out, really good builds. The opening track, which I don't know how to say that, there's a really cool like ghost noted snare pattern and like the sound of like children playing, and like you get this cool fade in and the music behind it, and what I would assume is an oud. I don't think it's a sitar. I'm going to go with oud on there. But it creates this big setting for the song, and then as the album goes on, like it kind of keeps going back and forth. Like you get a lot of these like cool, like very Middle Eastern sections, really cool extra percussion every now and then, like synths in the background. But sometimes it just shifts right into like the standard melodic death doom stuff that you'd expect from like Paradise Lost and early Anathema and My Dying Bride. I feel like I'm bringing up those bands a lot. But surprisingly, it's not all like down in the dumps melancholia. Like there's some really cool like bright ascending melodies in here that have like a very triumphant air to them. Sometimes there's just flat out aggressive, just like chunky riffs that feel more akin to just like flat out death metal. The production here, I would say, is pretty damn good overall. Everything sounds very rich and very full. Vocally though, I don't think that's this album's strength. The roars for the most part are pretty good, but there are points where it sounds more like a croak than it does like a flat out death metal roar. And I kind of got tired of the spoken word stuff. I like that in small doses where it's supposed to be like more theatrical and you're building up the story and blah, blah, blah. Like it's narration. But when it's done, you know, a little too much, it becomes just kind of monotonous. Like, okay, let's move on past that. Let's do literally anything else. But outside of that, I think this is awesome. The dreary harmonies in here are fantastic. The lush synths and where they sit in the mix, they're not too intrusive. They have a good knack for melody. So yeah, this was pretty damn good. And if you're a big fan, again, of Paradise Lost, early Anathema, God, man, I would say again, like My Dying Bride, yeah, the usual like Peaceville thing. There's a lot of like Peaceville stuff in here. Mother of Graves too, I would say, is kind of similar. Definitely check this out. And once again, thank you, Liv, for giving me this. I really appreciate that. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you again next year at MDF. And finally, we have Unto Others. Don't Waste Your Time, the complete sessions. This is a compilation of 2 of their early EPs, both called Don't Waste Your Time. And this is an Oregon-based heavy metal / goth rock band. Really kind of exploded here recently with their last couple of albums, and I've become a huge fan because, God, this band writes some of the most catchy, infectious fucking music out there. Like, it's almost annoying how catchy they are. I'm kidding, it's not annoying. I fucking love this shit. Now, surprisingly, I didn't get this at MDF when they were playing the pre-fest. I got this at Soundgarden before we actually made it over to the pre-fest, and they crushed live. Like, they were so much fucking fun. They even did a cover of Ramones' Pet Cemetery, which was fucking great. And yeah, this is yet again another collection of songs that are just insanely fucking catchy. They have such a knack for blending like classic heavy metal, like 80s heavy metal hooks with classic goth rock hooks. Like, this is like listening to fucking like Iron Maiden and Sisters of Mercy at the same time. And they can switch that on a dime. Like, you can go from just like absolutely chuggy, thrashy riffs to all of a sudden you're in these like lush, clean tones and like get like almost those typo vibes. Now, this actually being like a little bit earlier in terms of release for them, I can hear like some slight differences. Like, this definitely has a little bit more of like a punky energy. Like, most of these songs are up tempo, like whether it's like galloping heavy metal or like flat out D beats, it stays more up tempo. And Gabriel's voice is not as deep on here. Like, he has this really catchy, like almost kind of like monotone delivery in terms of a lot of their verses, but man, they can fucking belt out a catchy chorus. But there isn't like as much goth rock crooning on here. In fact, most of these songs are just very energetic. In fact, the only songs in here that really slow it down very much are I Feel Nothing and Can You Hear the Rain, which are catchier than shit. They're just slower than the other ones. Yeah, every song on this comp is absolutely killer. I've never heard their earlier stuff, and I still need to get a copy of the one that was originally titled Idle Hands forever ago. Like, that's the only one I'm missing now. But this is just a fantastic fucking listen. In terms of pre-fest, they were one of my favorites. I think Tribulation might have stole the show entirely though. Like, their set was unfucking real and very much in line with these guys. I think they were actually touring too together for, you know, that stop. Either way, if you're a big fan of just classic 80s heavy metal in the vein of like Ozzy Osbourne and again like Iron Maiden, but also like just awesome goth rock like Sisters of Mercy, check this band out in general, but check out this release. This is really fun and probably them at their most like flat out energetic throughout an entire release, at least as far as I've listened. But yeah, Unto Others rules. Looking forward to seeing them again in the future. And that will do it for another collection update. I'm already working on the next one. I'm trying to get like caught up to everything I got. I figure the next 2 collection updates should do it, provided I don't go fucking hog wild in a fucking record store and buy everything there. A little bit of restraint might actually help there. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're really 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which hopefully we've gotten to. Again, we've been kind of, you know, battling a lot of different schedule stuff. John's working a lot of overtime right now, and He doesn't want to completely, abandon us on a live stream because he loves doing those. So we're just trying to figure out a time to do it so we can all jump on there and talk about farts and dicks and shit. Probably music too, and maybe some movies. I don't know. We talk about dumb stuff in those, which is a selling point for the memberships, because that is the way to support the channel now. And if you would like to, there's a join button down below, and you can just smash that. You'll get a booger troll instantly, and you'll be able to watch dumb live streams that are maybe slightly dumber than our regular live streams. And of course, thank you guys so much for all of your support. It means the world to us. It's amazing doing this. Tons of content coming on the horizon. Hopefully by the time this comes out, we've at least filmed the At the Gates ranking. That kind of got pushed back because of scheduling again. John's working a lot of overtime, and I don't want to fucking put too much shit on him. But yeah, I got some ideas for some other videos, after I get done with the collection updates, and of course, tons of reviews. But yeah, you guys absolutely rule. You guys keep us going, and it's just still amazing doing this. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.